So the deputy mayor called me briefly about 20 minutes ago. He was on his way home from work, but will be joining us a little bit later. So we won't wait the meeting on him. We have Brock, we have Gord, Brian Maybe, Terry Fody, Mark Jameson. Okay, we've got everybody other than the deputy mayor. Got our fire chief, deputy fire chief, Daryl, Phil. Okay, I think we're good. It's getting close to 5:30. We're just, I guess we'll wait for Councillor Burrell to turn his camera on to make sure that I know that he's actively participating and not asleep, you know, just because he read the package. Not the fire package, I meant the whole committee of the whole package. He must be away from his desk at the moment.
So we have to do the wardrobe check.
Painting one of his lures.
He's on a pre-flight check.
Pre-flight check, for sure.
Yes.
So I'll just wait till it hits 5:30 and then we'll hit the gas and then we'll have some time to talk about some of this stuff. Everybody's able to see we'll share the screen. Just keep in mind when, Phil, when you're sharing the screen and giving the presentation, I can't see all the participants. So participants, if you really feel it important that you need to ask a question at that point, please unmute yourself and identify yourself, and then I can recognize you so you can speak, because I can't see everybody on the side screen, just in case. Okay, so we are at 5:30.
I see you join.
So we've got Marnie now and Kim, and okay. So we're at 5:30. We will call the meeting to order, and it's my pleasure to introduce our fire chief and our deputy fire chief, who will be quarterbacking this and along with our consultants. So I'll turn the floor over to the chief, and then you can pass it over to the deputy or to the consultant, however which way you want, Mr. Lawson.
Did you want to do a declaration first?
Oh, sorry, I apologize. Any declaration of interest or general nature thereof? If so, please state it now. I don't see any conflict, so I'll ask us to move on with the agenda. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Good to see everybody. Phil and Daryl, it's great to have you online here. Great working with you over this document, and I'm seeing great things from it that'll move us into the future. We did present this to council as was back in, I believe, early November, maybe, and there were some questions. So we've been working on it. The deputy fire chief's been working on it, and it went back to EMT. So I'll turn it over to the deputy to fill us in with any changes and bring on Phil to explain what we're looking at here.
Thank you, Chief Lawson. I'd like to introduce Daryl Cully from EMT and Phil Dawson from EMT. These have been the gentlemen that have helped us through our fire service review and modernization plan, as well as the community risk assessment. As the chief said, we have gone back and gone over a fair amount of information on this and highlighted, most importantly on this, the training center facilities. I think you'll come to see we've talked about it, or we'll talk about a number of things tonight. And we've also gone back over and highlighted the importance of the 12 recommendations that were put out. So I'll pass it on to Daryl Cully to start, and then on to Phil.
All right. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to meet directly with you and to review the process that we've been going through. Phil has done the majority of the work, and with his history in fire services and the extensive research that he's done, I'm very pleased with the outcome of this report. And I will turn it over to Phil, and we'll be available to answer any questions that you may have throughout. If there is an opportunity for you to ask questions during the presentation, I'm not sure how that will work with Zoom, but certainly as soon as we're done, there'll be lots of opportunity. So Phil.
Well, thank you, Daryl. Madam Mayor, Council, attending staff, really great to be here this evening. And Madam Clerk, are you able to put the PowerPoint up, or do you want me to do the screen share?
If you want to share your screen, it'd be easier, as you know, when to switch the slides. But if you can, I can do it too. It's up to you.
Okay, well, I'm set and ready to go. So while I do the transition here, a little bit of talk about today, a high-level overview, and we just want to make sure we're situated on the same page, and really want to leave time for questions and a little bit of feedback, because that is certainly important to all this. So let me know when you can in fact see my screen.
Yep.
And that's about center. It's hard for me to tell what you can see.
Yeah, we can see almost all of it.
Okay. Great.
We're off to the right-hand side of it, and you're not cut off too much there.
Okay, well, we're off to the races here. If there's anything, please stop me and please jump in. So really quickly, this started back in 2020. Of course, we were in, newly, I guess, COVID times, but our review was we were able to do a lot of things, and I came in and did some interviews with a variety of staff internally. And we looked at all sorts of things, right from records to operational to HR. The report itself, which is about 149 pages, in the executive summary, it does, and I won't review today, but it does go over the 9 different areas that we look at, including budgeting, vehicles, and equipment. So it is quite a lengthy process as well. My colleague, Rick Monkman, did the critical, the community risk assessment rather, and that goes part and parcel in the whole process. And coincidentally, the risk assessment was needed for Leeds Thousand Islands, so that worked out quite nicely. As per the RFP, and just to situate this, the vision, the focused lens that we used for satisfying the grant needs, risk management, mitigation, modernization, and looked at cost efficiencies and effectiveness. Now, I want to be very clear, that may or may not mean savings, but it does look at the rationale, the spending, and where the money is going. So that was quite a process. And again, I would be remiss if I didn't thank staff, the chief and the deputy, the admin, and internal staff for their support and help during this. So for the next few slides, I'm just going to go over the 10 very quickly, the 10 recommendations. We really do want to focus on the fire prevention officer and of course the training center, and that's what we wanted to leave a lot of room for. So recommendations 1 and 2, and these are not uncommon. The ENR, the establishing a regulation bylaw, which is required, really lays out what the service level is and what your fire service does. It is not uncommon that these things are a little bit dated and require some review. And it's a great opportunity for organizations to look at their service level and clarify exactly what their mission parameters are, and being up to date with current, not so much standards, but current focuses. Really, it's the proactivity of fire prevention, education, and mitigation It still includes the reactive response, hazardous materials, your all hazards response, but it really is a chance to update that. So this is normative and pervasive for most fire master plans or fire services review, as we see this E&R bylaw. So that is a recommendation number 1. Really quickly, the organizational, with any organization, communication. Communication is an issue on the fire ground. It's an issue at the admin in the office, and not particularly for Leeds Thousand Islands. These, again, like with number 1, are normative pervasive. So we always ensure to include this, and it's a real opportunity, especially when you're in a period of change and positive change, such as LTI is. You know, staff really need to understand where they fit into this. So often the fire service and firefighters is a bit disconnected because they're not there in the day-to-day municipal operations, but they really need to understand how they fit into your strat plan and how they're connected to getting Leeds Thousand Islands attaining their goals. And other than those two, we really got into the critical nature of having a fire prevention officer. As I mentioned earlier, there are reactive and proactive ways of providing your service. Reactive is your typical suppression and response, and the proactive is in your prevention, education, and inspection. So that's why this is near the top of the 10. And without going through all the details, it is on a part-time ad hoc basis hither to now. And the recognition from the chief and the deputy and staff are, for a risk management point of view, you really need to get into ensuring you have robustness in this area. And in fact, the provincial legislation, the FPPA, Fire Protection and Prevention Act, does mandate that you do need to have a robust prevention and education program. Covered much more in detail with facts and the background science in the 150-page report, but today we just wanted to bring it up. And hence that was recommendation number 4. It is really important to have a robust matrix and a program of inspections, whether it's the long-term care homes, which Leeds Thousand Islands has, facilities, as well as your businesses. And so hence this is at number 4. And again, this goes right with having a robust resources for your proactive prevention and inspection programs. We're going through this pretty quickly here. I'll just pause real quickly as we're halfway through the recommendations. Any questions?
Are there any questions from any of the members of council or anyone on the line? If not, we'll move forward. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you very much. As mentioned earlier, the community risk assessment was done, and standard operating procedure is that the fire chief comes to council, and it's a collaborative process and an updating process as they move forward of what the review found, and more importantly, moving forward, the proposed and hopefully to come is a robust inspection and prevention program. So that's what this very generally, but in detail in the 150-page report speaks to. Recommendation 5 is still around the fire prevention and recommending and asking the client to consider what level of staffing is required and what is needed, A, to get Leeds Thousand Islands up to speed, and B, the maintenance of such year over year in the areas of prevention, inspection, and education. Really focused on that proactive activity. Recommendation number 5, and again, this can be normative and pervasive in growing departments or departments that haven't quite made the transition to the electronic world. Fire is a very traditional environment, and certainly understanding how pen and paper and the cost for IT as well too, and the resources required to make that transition. So without further ado, it's just a recommendation to keep an eye on using technology, and whether it's notifying firefighters to respond, whether it's technology in fire prevention and inspection. The important part of this is that there's a robust infrastructure, so that documentation is very thorough and solid, and hence recommendation number 6. The fire service is very training intense. It's an apprentice style industry and job when it comes to the suppression side, which means training, but also on hands-on experience. But more and more, looking at the risk management part, it behooves organizations to have a real robust training program. And that's not necessarily all practical. There's theory, depending on the levels of service and the different services you provided, hazardous materials response, whether it's confined space, ice water rescue, those all require not only initial training, but maintenance training. And there is a move to justifying this with the NFPA standards, the Fire Protection Association, and these are not mandatory, to be quite clear. However, in North America, should, knock on wood, should something happen or there's an inquest, certainly for the safety of their firefighters and staff and the provision of service, these are recognized standards that would behoove an organization to move towards if they're not already there. And this kind of goes back to the whole importance of training, not just for initial firefighters, but maintenance training, and as you develop your staff as they move up through the ranks to captain and so forth. Sorry, I thought I heard something. Any questions? All
Do I
right.
have somebody who's trying to get in? I don't see anybody. Okay, go ahead.
And finally, for recommendation 7, because training costs a significant amount of money, and you have approximately 100 staff, firefighters, mixed of paid on call, full-time, that this has to be addressed over a multi-year period. And it's a great tracking model too. And again, should something happen like an inquest or questions into the fire service and its responses and its priorities, you have this robust records management and this documentation to prove that you've done all that. And having gone through an inquest myself, I can tell you intimately aware and of the importance of this and how much that really helps should you be in that situation. Recommendation, again, we're still in the training. You can see training is very important, but it really comes down to the constant monitoring and the constant planning and the constant checking to make sure that your training the firefighters are receiving really is responsive to what you're providing, the levels of service you're providing. Leeds Thousand Islands has a great, it's exciting working for this client because Leeds Thousand Islands has some really wonderful opportunities, not only with your surrounding departments and your surrounding non-fire potential partners, but also private organizations, be it institutional for training or otherwise, hitherto now not realized with the training center. Further to this, as you may have heard, that the Ontario Fire College, which has operated for 70 plus years, is going dark, bricks and mortar up in Gravenhurst as of March next month. So it's a really wonderful opportunity. Unfortunately for Fire College, where it was kind of the center of departments getting their training, there's a real opportunity to provide something in Leeds Thousand Islands. And coincidentally, you do have a facility, which we'll talk about shortly. The final point here is the key performance indicators. There is a real shift and a real trend that it's just not about putting the wet stuff on the red stuff. In your training, in your inspection programs, in a multitude of areas, KPIs and key performance indicators are great tools once instituted to measure your performance year over year. It's not just about how many incidents you go to. It's just not about response times. There are so many things, year over year improvements, year over year increase in inspections, year over year key performance indicators in areas of the proactive education and prevention. So that's what that talks about in detail in the master plan. Recommendation number 9, and again, this isn't unusual in departments. Standard operating procedures or standard operating guidelines, SOPs, SOGs. It's a living document. The fire service is very policy and guideline heavy. And as the service grows and matures, provides different service levels and different functions, these things grow. And so departments go through every so often, within a decade, at least once or twice, a review and a revision of their SOGs. They also want to make sure that their guidelines match provincial health and safety guidelines. The NFPA we talked about earlier, they do a real environmental scan to make sure that you have documents that cover all the specific areas, of which there are many and we won't get into today. But it is a bit of work, and these aren't so much as training guides, but as actual operating guides. Very important documents to have. And a few last pointers in the recommendation is your pay scale. The point system, quite frankly, is antiquated. It is recommended that fire admins takes a look at that and brings something a little bit more modern and fits with Leeds Thousand Island needs. We also talked about key performance indicators. We also find it helpful to couch our perspective, one fire department to the next, one municipality to the next. It's not, cookie cutter apples to apples. It's specific on the needs of the community and the needs of a policy which is set by council. But it is helpful using key performance indicators to see how you're doing in comparison or where there's some opportunities. So again, this is normative and pervasive to start looking at things that just aren't, comparing response times or comparing the number of annual incidents. And finally, recommendation number 12 is Sealy's Bay Fire Station and the appropriateness of that facility, work that's needed to go into that to upgrade it. And, are there other areas or are there other methods of providing that service level in that area of your community? So those are the 12 recommendation, nice doable recommendations. Kudos to fire admin who have already started down this road. We haven't been waiting to make improvements, to look at some of these recommendations. This is just kind of the final wrap up and tie it in a bow, nice documentation together with this presentation, the actual 150-page fire service review, and of course, along with the community risk assessment. That triumvirate of documents go hand in hand. As I mentioned earlier, several meetings internally. And again, we've been going at this since about May last year. So before we get into the training center, which is the major topic, we've been at this for about 20 minutes now. I'll just pause again for another opportunity for questions or for Daryl and the fire chief or the deputy to weigh in at this point.
Your worship.
Go ahead, Councillor Jameson.
Thank you, Your worship. For the purposes of the public presentation, mentioned the Sealy's Bay Fire Hall. And having read that internal document, could you put 2 more minutes into what you're recommending? Not a whole breakdown, but just what you think is the best way to approach managing number 2?
Well, through Madam Mayor, yes, I'm certainly happy to talk about that. I think it would be an opportunity to perhaps the fire chief and or the deputy to make a few comments, because we've spent a lot of time discussing this and looking at options, as well as working with other internal town staff, facilities for one, and seeing where there's some partnerships or there's some collaboration in dealing with it, because it's just not about the response area and the firefighters. We understand this is a community center of sorts and also a multi-purpose building. So with all due respect, Chief or Deputy, would you want to say a few words?
To you, Madam Mayor and Council, yes, definitely Station 2 has been an ongoing issue, and it was in the last fire master plan as well. We are looking at a lot of different options, because we do have some coverage area overlap that we need to take a look at as far as our tanker shuttle. We do have some other issues with our pumper and our numbers in that area. We're looking at the whole place as a whole, even with our firefighters and how many firefighters we're able to bring into there. But the building itself, we're definitely looking at what our best options are for that, whether we renovate it, whether we replace it, look at doing that in the next few years. And there are a few options of where we can go that might actually centralize that station a little bit better for the township and a response.
And
through your worship,
Go ahead.
just a couple of comments about the station out there. It is a functioning station. It has been since 1951 or whatever. It is directly across from the seniors' home in Sealy's Bay, which proved to be a godsend the day they had the fire. However, it is antiquated. We've identified that several times, and to close the facility out there or change it in any way, it's all dollars and cents, and that's through facilities, if the money's available, or capital funding or whatever, that we can get that done. It's been on the books for a while. We've looked at several options, as the deputy talked about. However, it's all within the realms of budgets, and this last couple of years doesn't look like it's going to be any fun. So it's more on the township's side, I think, to either identify that as a defunct building or whatever, and move it out of there, replace it, or renovate it extensively.
Madam Mayor, if I may.
Yep, go ahead.
Councillor Fody. Just to add to the chief's comments, it's a defunct building maybe as a fire station. As far as a defunct building, I could think of a lot of uses for that. If the fire station was to relocate, for instance, that building would be filled in a matter of hours. I could think of a few prime tenants to move in there as well. I just want to say that the most recent build that came to mind around here was the one in North Augusta. There may be newer ones, but that's the only one that I'm aware of. They built a fire station down there. I Googled the numbers, give or take today's dollars, we're looking at $5 million to put up a 4-bay building, bays for the trucks. And then of course there'd be accompanying meeting room, change room, showers, equipment room, what have you. Chief or deputy chief or our guests here, is that something that's of the norm in today's build for a station of that size?
Madam Chair, if I may, and Daryl Colley will weigh in. Daryl has a great overview of provincially, well, nationally actually, having done many reviews, different fire services in different provinces. But I'll quickly say that, considering this and the level of service and whether replacing or relocating a station does not abdicate, suppression services for that area. There are ways to look at mitigating the risk, looking at community health and safety. But those are involved discussions and certainly involve other areas. So I think that's still open. But Daryl, would you like to shed a little bit light on the normative and pervasiveness of departments looking at realigning their facilities?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. Keep in mind that a fire station is much more than just a building. The Fire Underwriters Survey says that for them to consider giving insurance ratings to anyone who lives in the vicinity of a fire station, there must be a minimum of 15 active and qualified firefighters working out of that station. So in addition to, whether that you're providing accommodations, you have to provide the appropriate apparatus, and the firefighters have to be properly trained and staffed to be of service. So it's much more than just taking a look at the building. To respond quickly to the price of a building, it depends on the type of construction you're going to do. There's a lot of beautiful modern fire stations that are $4 or $5 million, but there's also very effective steel structures and that sort of thing that can meet the immediate needs of the community for much less. We've seen stations go in that for areas that do not have very high call volume, but they're there to provide resources for maybe 1 or 2 pieces of apparatus as opposed to a 4-bay facility, and provide the minimum health and safety requirements of showers and proper change rooms and training rooms, etc., for less than half of that price. But again, it's not just the station. You have to take a look at whether that's sustainable in the long term. As communities age, as rural communities age, and young people often leave rural communities, the aging of the demographics of the fire service is changing. So there's not the same, when firefighters are leaving, it's more difficult to recruit younger firefighters often to fulfill those positions, especially when you consider the new training requirements that are coming in. And I'm going to make a generalized statement. It's not true across the board, but younger people tend to be less committed volunteer-wise to their communities as we are used to in past generations. So there's a lot to be taken into consideration as to whether the future of that particular station, and obviously having something directly in the community makes the community feel good, but you got to make that facility it has to be workable in all different areas. As far as building costs are concerned as well, one of the new trends that we're seeing in various places is to lease garage space that might be attached to another business or that type of thing, where the facilities can be provided more economically cost-wise, at least in the short term. So I'll leave it there unless there's any additional questions.
Okay,
Mayor,
go ahead, Mr. Maybe.
Councilor Maybe here.
Yep.
My question is, through your assessment of the fire department in Station 2, what was its major downfalls to that actual location? And are they addressable by a retrofit or repair to the building, or is it deemed past its point of service? Thank you.
Madam Mayor, if I may, perhaps the
Go
chief or
ahead.
the deputy.
Okay, Chief, did you want to answer that, or the deputy, whoever wants to jump in?
Through you, your worship, I think we've identified the general structure as being insufficient. Space for today's firefighters, decontamination, air management, several things, options involved with the contaminants from a fire are a big concern. Areas where we could retrofit that building would probably be there if it was retrofitted the entire downstairs. With the recreation center above it, it has been noted that there's been fumes, exhaust fumes, different things when there's an event going on when the crew had to leave. So it is posing a somewhat of a health hazard, if you will, for the community if we leave it as is. Otherwise, an air handler, a major retrofit there would be needed to bring it up to standard.
Your worship.
A follow-up if I could.
Councillor Jameson, may I speak?
Yep, go ahead, Councillor Jameson.
Thank you. I kind of tipped us into this discussion, but
Oh, sorry. Councillor Jameson, I'll ask you to hold off and then I'll recognize Councillor maybe to follow up and then I'll recognize you.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. So in the village of Sealy's Bay, is there more township property available to actually put up another fire station of whatever determination may seem fit for the area? And or is there a suggestion of moving it out of the village somewhere else? Thank you.
Chief, you want to answer that?
I'm not aware of what facilities or park areas or whatever is available out there that could be utilized. Possibly Ms. Goodman could update us on that. However, I am aware that we were looking at some overlap in the areas out there and some realignment of the areas. It's tough to move two stations in order to make one station fit, but there could be areas there that are available.
Okay.
Ms.
Thank
Goodman,
you.
did you want to add anything to that or was that sufficient? I don't have, you're muted, I believe.
There we go. My apologies. I'm muted on multiple screens here. I do think that there's an opportunity through this calendar year to examine existing municipal properties. I do understand that the Director of Operations is looking at a facilities condition assessment, which would further inform the information provided through this process. Additionally, though, it will look at capacity amongst other municipal infrastructure that may help inform future opportunities. We know the facility in Sealy's Bay, of course, is in high demand. It's one of the few community buildings up there, and as alluded to by Councillor Fody, I think there is an opportunity to have discussions about, how do we continue to move ahead? Of course, in saying this, there are several pieces that need to fall into place. So, of course, when I say all of this, none of this, of course, council would occur overnight, that it would have to line up with other strategic priorities and so on. But I do think that there's an opportunity to look at available properties and so on in the north end of our municipality.
You're muted, Madam Mayor.
I apologize. I'm back now. I've got too many screens going. Councillor, maybe that answers your question, I think, and then I'll go on to Councillor Jameson's question, and then we'll try to wrap this up to pin a bow on this.
Yeah, I just, by virtue of the fact, Councillor Jameson speaking, virtue of the fact I tipped this into the discussion, I appreciate hearing Councillor Maybe and Councillor Fody. It's clear reading some of the detail that we're at a stage with the Sealy's Bay #2 as a fire station that we've really got to be creative about what we do. And at the end of the day, the questions that arise up here have to do with being assured, residents being assured that the health and safety of the community is paramount in the discussion. Obviously, the issue of if the station isn't there, the insurance goes up. Those are practical, but it's the health and safety, proximity, and I understand the challenge of recruiting. And we've had this discussion, but it has been going on for some years. So I'm feeling assured looking at this report that we can repurpose the community hall, the downstairs community hall. And I know there's lots of discussion. The issue for us is going to be bringing comfort to the community that their interests are being served from a health and safety perspective. And I keep assuring people that our council and our fire services is very sensitive to those needs. So I appreciate the explanation coming back this evening. Thank you.
Okay, so anything else in regards to Station 2? If not, we'll roll on with the rest of the presentation. Seeing none, go ahead.
Through you, Madam Mayor, thank you very much. So really this brings us to, and great discussion, but this brings us to the final point of this evening, is the training center. Now, in sections 4.5 and section 6 of the Fire Services Review document, the master document, there is a discussion and points made. I won't go through that, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention. But working with internal staff, both in fire and outside, we really had some great discussion and great conversation about, okay, what does this boil down to? And that's where you've got the three options that are respectfully proposed and put forth to council today. And that's to close the facility. And without going into detail, closing the facility isn't simply as locking the gate and forgetting about it. There's some intertwining with an active operational fire station, as well as some financial matters to be concerned with as well. And so, you know, it's not as quickly, it's not as simple as just turning out the lights and leaving. The outsourcing training I mentioned earlier in the presentation this evening, the importance, the paramount importance of training, both in new firefighters and initial training, but also in the maintenance training. And so that is a consideration, one way to deliver training without a facility. And of course, third is operating this facility, which I mentioned earlier. There's some opportunities have arose recently that makes this something worth considering. Now, hopefully everybody can see all of this, all three columns. But you will have had this in your package, and working with internal staff really came down to this one slide and this 1-3 option model. And what we've tried to do, and at this point, I'll let the chief and the deputy speak, but some very honest and tough discussions on costs and what actuals were. Perhaps it's not unfair to say that based on past performance, you really couldn't indicate future performance. There were some underwhelming issues there, but we did try our best to narrow these down so that these are truthy numbers and really stood the test of a financial rigor. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think this is a real great opportunity for the chief and the deputy to walk through the three close the facility, outsourcing, and operating the training center costs.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So when we looked at this, we looked at the option of closing the facility and generating zero revenue. So still having place there, but not having a training facility or training center usable there. So the costs are still the costs. As far as the loan, we have a $45,000 loan a year until 2029. and looking at the administration and the utilities, we still have $5,000 in utilities to with our 2 training rooms, as far as the insurance, the heat, hydro, and such. Administratively, we still have, for the time being, at the very least, we've got a lot of things to try to shut down. We do have courses in line coming up this year, and just the administrative parts of that building to keep going, it ran about $20,000. So a net cost of that per year would be around $70,000 just to close it for the time being. Outsourcing the training, we looked at what it would cost to outsource the training. If we take away the training center, as Phil spoke about, because we are a training center, we can actually regional training center. We can certify our people by doing the NFPA standards. If we lose that ability to do that, we'll have to outsource that training to other facilities to have our firefighters certified, without a whole lot of work of bringing instructors in and doing learning plans through the college and such. So a revenue also, again, in that is zero. Our costs stay the same as far as the loan, and our expenses, utilities, stay the same. Going down further, you run into the equipment and the vehicles. You're looking at about $10,000 if you have to ship trucks and that off, because on equipment, as far as SCBAs, as those equipment have to go out to different regional training centers or different places to help our firefighters do the training. So you've got a fair amount of equipment in that. Meals and mileage, you're looking at about $80,000 a year for our firefighters, and accommodations of $40,000. We looked at the salary, and this was based on obviously with the point system, our money goes up and down. This year, in fact, it was actually almost $26 an hour, not 22, but 81 hours of training at 100 members approximately. You're looking at $180,000 over 3 years. Our course fees for firefighters to NFPA number 1 and 2 is about $15,000 a firefighter. So about $150,000 over the 3 years. And that doesn't include our maintenance and ongoing training. So that's just to get our firefighters to level 1 and 2. Maintenance and ongoing training would be the regular training that we would have to send out to, or have other instructors come in to certify, whether that's our first aid, whether that's our driving, whether all of those parts. So it's quite a cost to ship that all out. So your net cost per year is about $175,000, between $135,000 and $175,000. Looking at operating the training center, and we've last year, if it wasn't for COVID, I've heard that lots of times, but we had a very robust looking training schedule for 2020. Unfortunately, we didn't get to run our courses. We did have a couple of courses. I'll point out, we did have an ongoing driver training course that brought in about $5,000 that we run through the training center. And there's really not a whole lot of work on our end for that. And that's ongoing again this year. As well as our fire marshal or fire college courses. We had a pretty robust 2020 lineup of what we were going to do, and unfortunately we only were able to do one. Now we've got another year coming up in which we looked at what it would break down at, with about $1,000 a day net, $1,600 a day gross based on our past actuals. Our expected usage, obviously with a propane fired system, we can only have a certain amount of days that we can train with that dragger unit due to the cold and the usage of water to maintain that use. So we're looking at a minimum of 60 days of regional training center usage. Plus we're looking at 30 days of external usage through some of our partnerships with private and public. So as Phil said back a little bit earlier, we've been talking with different services such as Humber College, and and some municipal training center or training people, such as some health and safety training, some public works people coming in and doing some training. They've loved our idea of the track and the driver training area there. So there's lots of opportunity that I think we can get out and maybe have some extra potential with. We have a minimum of about $60,000 revenue anticipated, as we've got it broken down based on median amount of people in our classes. If we have more people, we obviously make more money, and a potential of 90 plus with the additional private and public partnerships for over those 30 days. So down into the next one, our costs for our loans are running around still $45,000 until 2029. And the expenses and the utilities obviously are going to go up if we're using that facility. We've got propane, we've got the extra hydro on that. So propane looking at about $35,000 a year if we can use that prop, the fire prop operationally, and a whole lot more. Equipment and vehicle, you're looking at about $10,000 worth of equipment and vehicle usage there. Meals and training, not required training accomplished through the locally. We don't have to ship that out. And the nice thing about the training center is we can do day courses or weekend courses, and we try to keep them into an area where most of our people are going home at the end of the day, and it's running Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, and nights and weekends basically is what we try to do. All our training we can do internally and internally within the current training hours and budget regular month training sessions. So basically we can go out and we can certify our own folks out there and run them through our training center and have them signed off through the register, the regulating body that trains everybody.
Okay. So just to give everybody a heads up, we've got 10 minutes left, so I'm not sure how many more slides we have to get through, but just to keep an eye on the time.
Phil, if you got anything to add, I spoke pretty quick on that because I know we're running short on time as well. So
yes, and Madam Chair, through the chair, we just have one more slide. We're almost at the end,
Okay. Watching
the time, but with a real hard look at it, and we spent quite a lot of time, in fact, together, really going through the numbers as the deputy and the admin and Director Goodman will speak to or attest to. And as it turns out, something that seemed to be a problem or not advantageous really turns to be when focused on as a real opportunity. And again, I'll reiterate the regional training center and the opportunity now that has presented itself with the fire college closing and your surrounding municipalities. Hats off to the current fire administration because they have been working hard and looking at generating additional business, additional clients, and that's that's the private public partnerships, but also another additional 30 calendar days, not necessarily successive, but 30 calendar days worth of potential revenue, and really hardening the numbers. These aren't inflated numbers on the revenue. That was based on some previous experience. So before we get to the last slide, and the deputy may want to speak on that, and we do want to get some time for questions, but really this culminates the whole looking at the risk management and mitigation, i.e. through your fire prevention, and education proactivity. Training, there is a risk management with not training, with not having standards, with not having the required robustness again in your training programs and your planning. Modernization of the fire services. Some of the 12 recommendations talked about IT technology and documentation. We talked a little bit about mentioned the point system for pay. So that addresses the modernization theme that we spoke on early in the presentation. And finally, the cost efficiencies and effectiveness looks back to Sealy's Bay, for example. It's not just a standalone fire station, as discussion and counselors have alluded to. But also there's some effectiveness in using the facilities such as the training center that you have. So with that, the deputy may want to speak on this, but the training center there are some health and safety and some operational issues to look at. And there is a one-time funding just to kind of get that back up. It's been idle, for want of a better word, given COVID in the last 12 to 18 months. And the understanding is that can be done within current budgeting envelope and other opportunities. So Chief or Deputy, would you like to say anything on this before we conclude and open up for questions and answers?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, very quickly on this. We looked at a few things that we would like to be able to move forward on, finishing up the repairs on the dragger unit. We do have in capital a couple of sea containers, which would make our new props for our live burns, and some work with our existing building that has all our rapid intervention. We are looking, our goal is to obtain through our existing budget and through some grant funding. Director Goodman and I have been looking at some different type of funding that is possible through the government and through some other funding avenues. So 50,000 and is kind of on the top end of where we're looking, but we're going to try to see how we can work our way through the budget and see where things are at to try to make those things become a reality, just so we can have the health and safety end of the training center covered.
Okay. Are there any questions for the presenters before we tie this up? Go ahead, Councillor Olkey. I can see I've got the full view now, and then I've got to see Councillor Maybe and nobody else just yet. So go ahead, Councillor Olkey.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, I'd like to thank the fire service and the gentlemen who've attended for this presentation. I'm thinking that looking at the list about the charts you put up about training and options, really closing it is only a factor in outsourcing, because whether you outsource or whether you stay in-house, you got the same costs. But the effect of closing and having to outsource really means that you come down to one good option, which is to maintain the training system, because it reflects money not spent as opposed to money saved or money earned. I do get some poking and prodding from constituents about the cost of this thing and how it's supposed to be making money. I try to explain to people that services aren't designed to make money, although they do try to be efficient. And the most efficient thing would appear to be to keep the training center going. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Olkey. Councillor Maybe?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, I have a question and comment. First is, how many communities around us actually have training centers that are capable of training their personnel? And again, how many don't have and would utilize the service? And I guess my comment is, with the Ontario Fire College closing, the opportunity of having more people come here and train is greatly increased. So again, having people come to the center, recouping whatever costs we can, is much better than the scenario 1 and 2. And we have it, we should be utilizing it to its fullest, booking it solid, and let's see what we can make of this little gem that we have out in our community, and make it maybe the star of the province. So let's go for it and get it going and make it happen. Thank you.
Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to get back to the statement that was made, our pay scale is antiquated. Can somebody expand on that, please?
Chief or Deputy, whoever would like to address that.
Yes, Councillor, and through you, Madam Mayor. Most municipal fire departments around us are all using a paid by the hour service now, instead of having the basically basically the pot of money. We X amount of dollars that we get, and based on calls and volume, that number goes up and down based on the number of calls and training we have. It causes quite a bit of grief in admin's life to try to, there's also a part for the Canada Revenue where we have hours that we can go against to get discounts for our firefighters as well. So using the hourly system is the tendency to go within most fire departments at this time. And it would actually make admin's life a whole lot easier as well. We're working on trying to figure out what the best rate, what the best way to do that, and that's certainly an ongoing thing that we're looking at right now.
Thank you.
Any further questions before we wrap this up? We're about 2 minutes before 6:30. Go ahead, CAO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you, I don't believe Councillor maybe got an answer to his question about what other training centers are in the area. Yes. So if the deputy could kindly answer that one.
Absolutely. So the very closest training center around us right now is in Kingston. But speaking with the Fire College, they're really unsure right now what direction they're going. They very likely are going in the route of a regional training center, but the feeling is at this time that they're looking to more use that as a training center for their own folks, in which they can certify their own people to the levels they need. And while they might go out for some courses, the idea is that it's possibly going to be quite a bit more expensive due to the fact that they're using professional firefighters to do the training at time and a half, or because obviously for most volunteers, weekends and nights are when we're able to train without taking time off work. So that's kind of the way it's being looked at by the Fire College, but I'll definitely keep you posted. I had a meeting with one of the Fire College people last week, and that was kind of the way he had put it to me, and he's in charge of those centers, so more to come.
Okay, any further questions before I wrap this up? I'd like to thank our presenters and thank you for being with us this evening and giving us a more in-depth look at our training center and the sorry, Councillor, maybe did I see you moving? Nope. Oh, okay. Sorry. We thank you for bringing the additional information forward that was requested by Council at the last presentation, and we'll be discussing this at more length at Committee of the Whole, which is about to start at any given second. So, can I have a mover and a seconder to that the special meeting adjourn? Councillor Oakey, Councillor Fody. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. And there's another link for the next meeting, so you need to log off of this one and log back in.